So, today we're going to look at two completely different stories. I mean, one comes from this tiny, remote village in the Himalayas, and the other, it's from a university commencement stage. They seem like they're worlds apart, right? But they both boil down to this one single kind of haunting question. What will your legacy be when you're gone?
I mean, what a powerful image, right? That's from a speech by Denzel Washington. This idea that we're haunted not by the things we did, but by all the things we didn't do. Okay, let's really dive into this, starting with a story that takes this whole idea of ghosts, well, a little more literally. So let's start with our first path, the ghosts on your deathbed. This is really a story about choices, and more specifically, how things like resentment and fear can totally poison a life, sometimes with terrifying speed. Okay, so meet Gagan. He's a former soldier who, because his father asked him to, left the city life in Delhi behind. He, his wife Madhu, and their two little girls settled back into the rhythms of his childhood village. A place where family duty and old traditions run really deep. And, on the surface, they just looked like a simple, hardworking family. But underneath all that, this deep resentment was starting to take root inside of Gagan, a feeling that was about to set them all on a pretty cursed path. See, after his father passed away, Gagan felt like he'd been cheated in the inheritance. He was convinced his brother got the better piece of land, and this bitterness just festered. Then, tragedy hits. During a bad storm, his mother and his pregnant wife, Madhu, supposedly slip on a treacherous path and fall to their deaths. But not long after this so-called accident, his 11-year-old daughter starts to change. I mean, drastically. She's screaming at night, her body is contorting, and she starts to look really, really sick. And there was this one really unsettling detail about the accident that the villagers just couldn't quite shake. When they found Madhu's body, she had these weird wounds on her chest. Now, at the time, everyone just figured it was a wild animal, pretty common in the mountains, but it was a detail that just didn't quite fit. As his daughter's condition got worse and worse, it became pretty clear that the secret behind those scars, it wasn't going to stay buried. The truth of whatever happened on that cliffside path was clawing its way back into the world of the living. The villagers started to whisper, was this family just having some terrible luck? Or had they invited something dark into their home, maybe through some unspoken sin? The answer, well, it was going to come from a place nobody ever expected. Okay, so to really get what happens next, you have to understand something about the local beliefs in this part of Uttarakhand. There's a belief and a type of spirit called a masan. And a masan isn't just some random ghost. It's a powerful entity that takes over a person's body for a very specific reason, usually to expose some terrible truth or to get justice. And it was a masan that had taken hold of Gagan's daughter. During an exorcism ritual, the spirit finally spoke. And it wasn't just any spirit. It was the ghost of Madhu, Gagan's murdered wife. She revealed the horrifying truth. Gagan, totally consumed by his greed for land and desperate for a son, confronted them on the path. He was furious that Madhu might be carrying another daughter, so he pushed his own mother off the cliff. And when Madhu screamed that she would tell everyone, he stabbed her in the chest and threw her body down right after his mother's. Gagan's choices didn't just lead to his own downfall. They literally created the ghosts that would expose him. His fear of not getting what he thought he deserved, his bitterness and his violence, it all ended in his own ruin, leaving behind a legacy of just horror and death. So Gagan's path is a dark one, right? It's defined by falling backward into resentment and fear. But there is another way to approach life setbacks, a philosophy of falling forward, which, well, it builds a completely different kind of legacy. And this comparison, it really gets to the heart of the whole thing. Gagan's path was all driven by this fear of loss and resentment. The alternative path, the one Denzel Washington talks about, is all about fearlessly chasing your potential, being resilient when you fail, and building a legacy of purpose, not destruction. Denzel basically throws out that common advice to have something to fall back on. His argument is, look, if you're going to fall, and you will fall, you should fall forward. At least that way you can see what you're about to hit and learn something from it. It's this commitment to always moving ahead, even when you fail.
So the real key here is how we frame our failures. Denzel's philosophy kind of breaks down into 3 simple ideas. First, you've got to take risks. Don't be afraid to step outside the box. Second, you have to embrace failing, even failing big, because it's just proof that you're aiming high. And third, Treat every single failure not as the end of the road, but as a step forward, a lesson learned.
I mean, think about it. We remember Thomas Edison for inventing the light bulb, not for the 1,000 times he failed to make it work. We remember the baseball legend Reggie Jackson for his home runs, not for holding the all-time record for strikeouts, 2,600 of them. Success is built on this mountain of failures that we almost never get to see.
And this is just a brilliant illustration of the difference between a dead end and a redirection. Denzel himself started out as a pre-med student, failed, switched to pre-law, then journalism, and ended up with a 1.8 GPA before he finally found his real path in acting. Each one of those failures wasn't a stop sign, it was just a signpost, pointing him in a new direction. So now we have these two paths laid out. One creates ghosts of violence and regret, and the other one seeks to confront the ghosts of unfulfilled potential. Which brings us all the way back to that central question. What are you going to build?
Now, Goggins' story is an extreme example, for sure. But it shows how a life focused on resentment and fear can create a legacy of actual, literal destruction. The ghosts that haunt Denzel's vision, though, those are probably more familiar to us, right? That nagging feeling of what could have been, the ideas we let die on the vine, the risks we never, ever took. Ultimately, the choice is ours. We can let our setbacks and our fears poison us, creating a legacy of bitterness and regret. Or we can choose to take risks, to fail, to get back up, and to fall forward toward our potential. So I'll leave you with that question from Denzel. When your time comes, what kind of ghost will be standing around your bed?